I'd like to thank Dr. Duke Pesta for joining me. He's the director of the Freedom Project Academy and a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, as well as the author of the book, The Renaissance and the Postmodern, a study in comparative critical values. He's also the host of the Dr. Duke Pesta Show. He's a friend of my show, which is why Statue Daniel is dressed for the occasion there. He's decked out in kind of his diploma apparel. And I want to thank Dr. Duke. How you doing, Duke?
Great, Daniel. Good to see you. How's everything with you?
Everything is wonderful. And I wanted to start off asking, in your capacity as an academic, I've been noticing this phrase a lot lately, and I actually like the phrase. It's called luxury beliefs. And it came to my attention the first time within my field of consciousness regarding a couple weeks ago. There was a number of kind of incidents where people on the political left kind of got bit. For instance, the case of Ryan Carson, he's an Antifa activist, or was, and his girlfriend was a BLM activist, and he was stabbed by somebody in the inner city, and the girlfriend did not help him. And one of the articles addressing that was called "The High Cost of Luxury Beliefs." And I was wondering, if you had any opinions about, the universities and their role in imparting luxury beliefs to the youth.
I've also heard it called limousine liberalism, and I think both words work very well, and I think that's right. Another way to refer to this is first world concerns, right? When you have the level of wealth and insulation from the horrors that go on in places like Israel, more or less, then you can be smug and arrogant, and you can be theoretical. And I think, Dan, you make a great point. What I see at the university, it's theoretical ethics, theoretical morality. It's the way they think it should be. They're good Marxists, right? They believe in utopia. They believe that reason, guided by them, especially people with PhDs, if everybody just shut up and listened to what the academic educrats say, the world would be perfect. And so that, of course, is based exclusively on the fact that universities are we are a isolated and in many regards protected society, have been for a long time. When was the last time, taking away 9/11, when was the last time a war was fought in this country? I guess you have to go back to the Civil War. And so that level of insularity, when you take it societally, you can deal with it. But then there's one more step of insularity at the universities. I mean, these are places that have billion-dollar endowments, and they don't have to pay taxes on it. They keep reaping money from the taxpayers. They get richer and richer. They get more and more money from us, the taxpayers. And the money that they have in their endowments, they never have to really touch. So the level of privilege
Insularity.
Here, it's their own world too. Let's use their own worlds. This is academic privilege. It is vastly more privileged than anything that white people have in this country at this point. And so, yeah, I think all those things funnel into a great deal of delusion and megalomania on the part of PhD holding morons who are educated beyond their intelligence.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I love that quote. What was it? A vulgarian is someone educated beyond his actual level of intelligence. Yeah. And but one of the things that I was thinking about regarding what you were saying, Spain, for instance, is poorer than Harvard. Harvard, with its endowment, has a higher GDP than the country of Spain. I mean, so some of these universities, and you make a good point, they don't pay taxes as if they're churches. So they're basically, operating under a false aegis that they're an institution of learning, when in fact, in so many cases, they're kind of, doing research. They're getting government grants. They're kind of tied into Raytheon and all these pharmaceutical companies. Like what's his name? Noam Chomsky made that point. He said that when he was a young man and he went to MIT was surrounded by engineering firms and stuff like that, and they were getting and he said now if you look, they're all surrounded by biotech, pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that. And so the universities are feeders for that. They get grants from this thing, and so a lot of the professors don't even bother teaching. They'll send in a graduate student, and they're going off doing grants and getting money, generating money for the university, which, as I said, is operating much like a hedge fund. So I mean that kind of speaks to their. Good.
It is a church, and we also have to point out it is a church. I mean, they do get their 501c3 like the churches do, and what they teach, at least when it comes to the humanities and human, I'm not, the biotech people are the biotech people. However, there is a crashing level of ethics in the sciences now. I mean, the idea that this science is guided by morality or ethics is waning quickly. They are churches. They are radical churches, and they function as churches. The podium now is the new altar, and the children. It's a very orthodox form of religion that if you dare to buck it, if you're a student or a faculty member who pushes back, they engage in the kind of religious the kind of religious segregation and persecution that we've seen from any religion going back thousands of years, especially the way Islam functions in the world today. It's clerical, really, when you look at it.
Yeah, no, it is. That's a great way to put it. I remember I had an aunt who was a Jehovah's Witness, and if a Jehovah's Witness kind of stepped out of line or was guilty of heresy, they would disfellowship that Jehovah's Witness, which means that everyone would basically shun them, ignore them, cut them out of their lives. Their family members would do that. We saw that during, I mean, like the last kind of political cycle, where families would like disown a child if they voted for the wrong candidate. And this wasn't coming typically from the right. It was coming, overwhelmingly from the left, as well as, during the last, we'll say health crisis, to be safe. Where people were just cutting off family members. I mean, as if you're dead to me. I mean, this is the behavior of a cult. And I've often noticed that too, that in cults, they basically will restrict protein so that your brain can't function at an optimum, and you become more passive when your protein intake is cut off. And I've always noticed that, like, whenever, especially college age girls, right? When is they're going, oh, I'm a vegan now. They're restricting their protein, much like a cult. And now you see the colleges promoting that, you will eat bugs. We're going to get rid of beef, and it really does. It operates like a quasi religion,
Well, and we said this about Marxism. I mean, in fact, there was some legislature was trying to pass a law that suggested that Marxism, socialism, is a religion. Think about universities for a second, Daniel. I've been involved with them for, when I started going to college, now 40 years. And I can tell you that the reason socialism is so powerful on college campuses when it's not in most of the rest of the world, certainly Hollywood, but it's the same. Hollywood has the same insularity that the universities do. Think about universities for a second. You go to school, you start going to school, you're 5 years old, you go to high school, right as you finish school, you go to high school. Then as soon as high school is over, you spend 4 years in a college, and PhDs, the professorate, they leave high school, immediately get a master's degree, immediately get a PhD. And from there, they immediately enter into university. Generally speaking, they have no really acquaintance with how the real world works. They've never had to make a payroll or be responsible for somebody else's healthcare. They've never had to, stay in business from year to year because of what's happening in their endowments and the guaranteed money from the government, state and federal. And so these are people who get up before the podium 2 or 3 times a week for 9 months out of the year. They have their summers off generally from teaching. Like you said, at the big universities like UW-Madison down the road here, the teachers teach 1, maybe 2 classes a semester, sometimes none at all, as you said, particularly in the sciences. And so think about it. I mean, here you got a situation, the campus, the way it's structured, is the perfect vehicle for socialism. The elites show up a couple times a week. They make a few speeches to their students, but the people who cut the grass, who clean the toilets, who bring the food in, who trim the bushes and vacuum the carpets, they don't get tenure. Nobody knows their names. And tenure is a perfect socialist scam, right? After 6 years of not doing something stupid, you pretty much have employment for the rest of your life, and nobody else has that. So again, it's a place where it runs because everybody else does the grunt work. The professors are the stars of this, and the administration, they're the ones who control the oligarchy. They have the best of everything. They do the least amount of work. And so when you think about that, the universities are structured in such a way that they are the perfectly theoretical petri dish for socialism. And so no wonder that's what they cling to. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has to take the burden of supporting them. And we never even ask them to pay their fair share. I say this too, but before I turn it back to you, if we had a sane federal government, we would require, because it's the federal government giving these student loans out to kids who don't belong in college, can't do college, don't even really want to be in college, but you're giving them a bunch of money vis-a-vis go start as an intern at a construction company. We're kind of forcing kids into college. If we had a sane federal government, we would require every student loan be paid back in half by the university if kids can't get jobs in the fields they were trained in. So if you're an English major and you can't get a job, well, at least half of your student loans should be paid for you by the university who failed to give you the skills to get the job in your area. That would be, I tell you, if we did that, there'd be a lot less student loan debt and a lot fewer kids who shouldn't be in college wouldn't be here.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I mean, the point is student loan debt, generating debt. There was a great article about how we inherited the concept of kind of selling debt. Like the Roman Empire got it from the Middle East, right? Merchants come into the Roman Empire and show them, hey, you don't have to sell pluses, you can sell minuses, sell debt instead of actual goods or services. And so somebody brought to the attention, they were looking at the books of the Treasury, and the Treasury was talking about America's biggest assets and liabilities. And its number one asset was not land, was not oil, was not gold. Its number one asset was student loan debt. Trillions of dollars of student loan debt, and then they sold it on the secondary markets. So they were basically kind of encouraging, through subsidies and everything else, all these high school guidance counselors channel all the kids into college, and even if they drop out, it doesn't matter as long as they incur that debt. The government gets the debt, sells it to some hedge fund in Japan or Brazil or whatever. They're out free and clear, and so it becomes kind of a scam on the government's level to generate revenue through basically creating debt slaves. And there was the Sumerians had their word for freedom was to be without debt. Amagi, I think was the word. And so basically they're making these kids slaves, debt slaves. They can't get houses, because they're in debt. They can't kind of buy stocks or buy into the system because they've been shackled to this debt very early on. It's criminal. I wanted to hit something too, just speaking of academia in general. There was a woman named Amy Wax, and she's a professor at a law school in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, I believe. And she got in trouble for talking about things that we're not in a free world anymore. And so she was speaking quite frankly and forthrightly about her fear of immigration, mass immigration, because of the allowing in people who don't have a heritage of liberty or freedom. And she addressed, the fact that, perhaps in East Asia, where they're known as a much more kind of, traditionalist society, that they tend to stereotypically be more conformist. And she said that this might clash with our heritage of freedom and distrust of centralized power. I wanted to play the clip for you. Just bear with me one second.
That's a good point.
They've become so woke, but I consider that a very negative and dangerous.
What do you mean by the spirit of liberty? You saying they're not Democrats, or somehow they're
people who are Whiggish?
I mean, small d Democrats
who are mistrustful of centralized concentrations of authority, who have a kind of "don't tread on me" attitude, who are focused on the Bill of Rights, on our freedoms, on our liberties, on sort of small scale personal responsibility, who are nonconformist in a good ways. And, I think it's been written about Asians tend to be more conformist to whatever the dominant ethos is. So the wokeness, I'll give you an example of what concerns me, okay, of the sort of thing that's happening. And it's very caught up with the fashionable multiculturalist anti-American sentiments that wokeness represents, because wokeness is now the luxury belief of the upper class. And that's what Asians think they have to ape if they're going to be upper class. They look at, upper class white people and see what they believe. And they say, well, we have to believe what they believe because we want to be upper class too.
Okay. Well, you can see why she got canceled. She kind of tread over many things that you're not allowed to say. But the basis of that clip there that I was interested in was her talking about foreign students coming to the United States and getting luxury beliefs because they associated it with the ruling class. And they might not actually believe these luxury beliefs, but the school becomes kind of the incubator for this kind of America hate, whatever it is, whether it's a rainbow flag, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could tell them juggling. If that was told them, oh, the rich like to juggle, suddenly I like to juggle, kind of like it reminded me of Spain. The king had a lisp. And so in the 1600s, all the nobles started mimicking this lisp of the king. And to this day, Spain pronounces their T's or their C, the letter C, like a TH, like a lisp, because it was people aping what they thought, like social climbers. And so now woke culture has been sold to immigrants as what they have to adopt if they want to become part of the, upper class.
It's entitlement. I mean, for hundreds of years, people came to this country in gratitude. They saw in this country something they wanted to model in themselves. They wanted to participate. All four of my grandparents came here from Italy in the 30s when the rise of Mussolini. And, when they got here, they knew they had to wait in line. They knew they were starting at the bottom. They knew they had to struggle. That's how it works, right? But they were grateful for the struggle because the so-called struggle here was so much easier than the lives they were living. They had much more opportunity here. I never heard a word of Italian from my grandparents. Even though none of them spoke English till they got here. And that was because they wanted to be Americans. And so this was something that you wanted to become. You wanted to fit in the sense that you too wanted your freedom. You too wanted your opportunity. You too wanted to have a future that was debt-free, going back to your Sumerian analogy. And I think that's true. Now, these people are being not just sneaking across the border, they're being imported here. While we're dumbing down American kids, we're not giving them the education anymore that will allow them to compete in STEM fields. We're bringing in people from Southeast Asia who do have those skills, and we are immediately making them the upper elites. This happened in England, right? For a long time, the national health has been dominated by Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian doctors and nurses. They're the ones doing this here because Brits aren't rising to that level themselves.
Yeah, this is how they would go to America to get more money. Like
right.
An English doctor would go to America or Canada or Australia, and now they have a shortage, so they're getting Africans and Middle Eastern. I just wrote a paper on the origins of critical race theory. And it's very, very interesting. I mean, everybody's heard of the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse and Theodor Adorno and Erich Fromm and all these people, and they flee, Europe. They had the Institute for Marxism, and then they changed it to the Institute for like Social Studies or something. And so they flee, Hitler. They come to the United States, and no sooner do they arrive, instead of saying, "Oh, thank you, America, for giving me safe haven," no sooner than they arrive, and they're like, "How do we collapse the place? How do we subvert it?" And so they start coming up with these ideas, and it was Herbert Marcuse in particular who conceptualized using race as a revolutionary concept to try to, because they were frustrated that the proletariat weren't rising up, that their standard of living was getting too high, they were getting too comfortable. So they said, haha, we can use race to basically collapse the society. So we're going to start doing censorship. We're going to start teaching people how to basically reinterpret, critical theory, right? We're reinterpret everything that they look at, and and change the fundamental bases and assumptions of the society. One of those was meritocracy. That in the American DNA, in our civilizational DNA, was the idea of meritocracy or impartiality of the law. And he said we have to get rid of both of those. And so all of a sudden you have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it comes into collision with the concept of meritocracy. And where these two are fighting each other, the Civil Rights Act kind of trumps it. And so you have these new imperatives that are getting rid of the old system, and corporations were very, very scared. What do we do? I mean, they used to do standardized testing like the Army did, and now they're afraid of getting sued. So what they did was they basically outsourced this function to the universities. So now the universities are the de facto HR departments of companies, because the companies themselves are afraid of getting sued for not hiring somebody who they know to be unqualified. But they know that they have this quota system, and so now it's, there you go, universities, here you do, what's your take on that, if I may ask?
Well,
the university is an HR department.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant analogy. And you go back before Marcuse, you had Gramsci, and you can go all the way back directly, straight line to Marx. And this is not surprising if we understand how that works. Look at in another way you could look at it. Another more tortured analogy would be to say that the universities are the Pravda of the former Soviet Union. They, like the press, they're supposed to tell the truth, and they have they control information, right? Mm-hmm. And the universities, like Pravda, just lie now. They're just lie. I mean, we're telling kids that that male and female, actual biological, demonstrable male and female, right? Unarguable. We're telling them kids that man and woman is now a social construct. But 102,000 made up genders between male and female are absolutely true. And they don't even need biology. They're true at the expense of biology. I mean, and that's one example of thousands. They're lying to them about American history, right? They're lying about slavery to these kids. Everything they're doing, you just said what you brought us up earlier, right? Immigration. Amy Wax is right. And you know this. Any country that does not protect and defend its borders is not a country anymore. And we're being told that all these millions coming across the border, that the minute we ask them to speak English or to conform or become capitalists or love their country, now that's where the systemic racism comes in. So basically what the universities are telling the high-end people we're bringing in, the new elites that aren't white, and the lower class people who have no money, no education, no prospects. We're telling both of them that the middle class Americans, it's not the 1%, it's the middle class.
Yep.
What gives where our wealth is in the overwhelmingly is in the middle class. That's what they're coming for. And boy, I don't know about you, but have you ever been in a Costco lately? Here's Appleton, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It's winter time. It's a cold climate in the north. I mean, it's a relatively small town. You walk through the Costco here, you see again African and Asian immigrants everywhere. I mean, 3 years ago you would never see this. Now, not only are they here, and again, I don't want to suggest that that controlled immigration is a good thing necessarily, not an evil thing, but controlled being the word. Now you see these people, and they don't speak a lick of English, and they have lots of money. I mean, you look at the things that they're buying; they're not subsisting on potato chips and day-old milk. I mean, they had carts full of stuff. This is America. Great. But the question is, where'd that come from? How did you get here so fast?
Well,
don't know the language, right?
One of the things that they're doing too is like one of the cliches now, and I don't want to get in trouble, but this is kind of a stereotype because it's happened numerous times. Is, say, for instance, you have, and I'm throwing this out there, like Pakistani immigrants who come, and they will go on welfare. They will get, stuff for free from the taxpayer. They'll go to a Costco and fill up their cart with bubble gum and candy bars and sodas, and then go back to their gas station and stock the stuff up there and sell it. So a lot of those, kind of carts that are filled with all this stuff, for them, it's a feeding frenzy. It's like, oh, wow, I get stuff for free. No one else does. So they can artificially climb up the social ladder. Another thing that they do is they basically give immigrants tax rebates and subsidies. So if an immigrant opens, not a native born American, but if an immigrant opens a gas station, they don't have to pay taxes for like 6 years, right? And so what they'll do is they'll basically hand on the gas station to their brother after that 6-year period. And then he doesn't have to pay taxes for 6 years. And then after that 6-year period, he'll hand it back. So basically he doesn't have to pay taxes. That family doesn't have to pay taxes ever. The American does. And so people will gloat and say, oh, well, if Americans are so hardworking, how come these immigrants are getting ahead? Because the system is rigged in favor of them. That's why. If you gave the same grants and subsidies to the American, the same free stuff, you would say, and they know this, which is why they've rigged the system in such a way.
You just saw last week where the federal government reminded, quote unquote, credit card dealers that you cannot discriminate against immigrants. So if an immigrant applies for a credit card, you better give it to them, the federal government said, right? Yep. So on top of everything else, you have this almost unlimited credit line. And again, when your federal government is warning private organizations, you no longer have the right to decide who does and doesn't get credit. You must give it to the the illegal alien who just crossed the border. You got to give it to him, or else the government's going to punish you. Now, again, the same poor white kid who applies for his first credit card doesn't get it. Yeah, there's no protections there, is there?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, well, that I wanted to kind of talk about the fact as well. I wrote down, I have some notes here, as you can see, but one of my notes is Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter, the economist back in the 30s. He was talking about like how academia little by little is becoming kind of like what they used to be back in the Middle Ages, like when you would have somebody go to a benefactor, like a wealthy prince, you know, and you would have like a guy, and he'd try to get the patronage of the prince, and he would basically just be a propagandist for that prince. And how academia has stopped kind of going for truth, and they've just become the spokespeople for the powerful. And that's what these luxury beliefs are. They're basically, you know, a lot of the things that the powerful want, the wealthy want. Like, for instance, there was the book Anti-Fragile by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and he was talking about the evils that arise when you decouple the liabilities from the benefits of a particular thing. And so he even mentioned, I think, in the book, you know, like illegal immigration, that the rich will benefit from it and not get any of the liabilities, because their kid is not going to get tuberculosis from, you know, somebody, a migrant right over the border. Their kid is not going to get stabbed because they're in an elite, you know, kind of prep school or in a gated community. So they see none of the liabilities, but they do see the cheap labor benefits. Whereas the person in a poor community who does get their kid stabbed, there was a mother whose son was murdered and set on fire. So she gets the liabilities, but none of the benefits. And so all of a sudden there's this disconnect, you know, this bubbling populism, because the ruling class is utterly disconnected from cause and effect. And so now these luxury beliefs are basically, you know, like all these things that benefit the wealthy, and now they're being taught to young kids who aren't even from the wealthy elite class. They're not even getting the benefits. These are usually the kids who were first generation college. Their mom was a waitress, their dad was a bus driver, but then they come and they want to ape these elite beliefs, which are not just kind of open borders, globalism, but also kind of sexual mores. You'll see people on the right kind of accuse, you know, our elites of possibly not being totally sexually normal. And so all of a sudden, you'll see the people on the left kind of mock the right. Oh, that's just crazy. They don't traffic things. I don't want to get in trouble. But then all of a sudden, you'll see them kind of corroborate it, because they'll start aping it. And they'll start, you know, kind of all the stuff that because they associate it with the ruling class, the wealthy. And you'll see like these little college girls walk down, you know, parades saying, we're against pedophobes. And it's like, well, why did you adopt that as your luxury belief? Because she identifies it as being part of the
right.
ruling
And
class.
you just gave the perfect example. Why is there radical pornographic sex books in elementary schools? Why are we teaching 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds that their genitalia and their identity don't mix? Why are we mainstream or grooming, right? We're sex between adults and children in books, in actual books in middle schools and high schools. We're doing it for the reason you just said. The immigrant now that crosses the border, the LGBTQ, these are not victims. They are the victimizers now. They are the ones who have been given by your federal government. They've been given the power, right? The doctors from foreign places coming here and taking those jobs. These are the people who have the power. Yet, because they of the critical race theory nonsense, they have decided that they, with all the power they have to shut you down, to cancel, to take that job, to not have to pay taxes, everything you've just said, they now are the power who gets to pretend that they're the victims. The more power they get, the more they scream, we are the victims. The more you are privileged by the progressives, the more you scream that you are not, and you are victimized. And it's a vice that's just squeezing the civilization to the point at which sooner or later it's going to pop and it's going to be ugly.
Well, one of the things, yeah, that happened during the French Revolution too. William Guy Carr talks about that. He wrote a great book called Pawns in the Game, and he says that this is done on purpose. It was done during the French Revolution, where they'll basically release kind of antisocial types and people of kind of criminal, you know, release the Bastilles, have all the rapists and murderers and stuff out, and they're purposely meant to oppress the people. And then after the people are sufficiently oppressed by, you know, kind of the deviants and stuff, then comes phase 2, where, you know, the economic elites basically jump to the other side, and they start funding Mussolini, or they start funding Hitler, and they say, okay, well, now I'm going to be the good guy, and now you get to wipe out all these people who I allowed to oppress you and encouraged to oppress you in this first stage of the thing. But I wanted to talk about something else as well. I read this article, and it was really interesting, because you said something when you said the more entitled and privileged you get, the more you pretend like you're the victim, because being a victim imparts certain privileges. So even that, like it allows you to abuse other people, because you say, hey, I was the victim, so I get to victimize you. But so you'll see these kids who are basically the guard dogs of privilege, of the privileged class, and they'll say, oh, well, I'm against inequality, I'm against this systemic racism, I'm against this system, but they're actually the guardians of that system. I'll give an example. I was reading this article, and it was a guy who had graduated from the Ivy League, and he was in a like a Goldman Sachs, like an investment bank, and he was noticing, he was like, are we just gatekeepers? He was like, all the people who work here are also from the Ivy League, and they're doing jobs like Bill over there, who went to Princeton. He's basically doing he's running the website, but like it's no more of a website than a high school kid could run. So why did it require someone from Princeton to do that job? And then he realized it's because they're hiring us because we have the right opinions. We've been social, and we're basically there to make sure that none of the unwashed people who don't have the right opinions come in. So we're gatekeepers for these luxury beliefs, and they're grossly overpaying us. He was like, I myself, I don't do anything all day. All I do is PowerPoint presentations. He's like, I don't actually work, yet they're paying me like all this ridiculous money because so the schools are basically churning out these kids who, by their own admission, at least this guy, I'm a gatekeeper. I just exist to make sure that the ruling class stays the ruling class, and to lock out the unwashed.
You absolutely got it. And it's because, to give you an example, it's these children of privilege, right? Who are the elites, the college professors, all these kids now, the elite kids in this country, the gatekeepers, as you say, they actually scream and scream and scream about oppression. And then they immediately align with Hamas, right? I mean, what you see, that kind of brutality, right? That's justice.
Okay, well, with that, I will end this broadcast, and I will ask you, Duke, to kind of tell my viewers where they can find you and your great work.
Thank you. Well, Freedom Project Media and Freedom Project Academy, our school, and our media department, that would be a great place to go. The school is a classical education online with traditional learning, something that we don't get in the public schools. We actually do believe in good and bad, right and wrong, true and false. And then the media helps me produce these wonderful shows. They've got about 20 shows we do a week. So I would say if you're looking for this kind of culture, Daniel, our conversations with all sorts of other people, check out Freedom Project Media. And especially if you like the conversations you and I have, look for the Dr. Duke Show. It's free on all app places. Any place you can go to get apps, you can get the Dr. Duke Show free, and you'll hear these kinds of conversations down the line.
I just like how the theme kind of played right into, and we teach classical.
Yes, sir.
So it's yes, everybody run to Dr. Duke, but also run to Freedom Project Academy, for your children. And it is a great place. I did a little ethics club there last season. So, okay, Duke, I will catch you next time, and thank you for coming on.
Let's talk again soon. Thank you, Daniel.
I'd like to take a moment to thank you for watching. If you'd like to stay updated, hit the like and subscribe buttons. But more importantly, if you don't want to see me reduced to shelling my old merch, such as the Daniel Natal in action figure, where you can see Daniel engaging in an action as he watches TV, or engaging in an action as he surfs the internet, or failed products like the Daniel Natal Pez dispenser, or the even more considered Daniel Natal urinal cake, you can consider supporting the show by buying one of my audiobooks. For instance, if you'd like hours of smooth listening pleasure, consider my recording of The Study of Sociology by Herbert Spencer. You can see the link to purchase it in the description below.